Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Savannah Book Festival's 2021 virtual season. I'm Kris Hummer, the executive producer of local content for WSAV, the NBC affiliate here in Savannah. And over the years, I have had the pleasure and honor of interviewing so many of the authors who have appeared here at the book festival. I'm excited to continue that honor tonight with Larry Loftis, the USA Today and international best-selling author of the nonfiction spy thrillers, codename Lise, the true story of the woman who became World War II's most highly decorated spy, and Into the Lion's Mouth, the true story of Dusko Popov, and I'm sure I got that name, I butchered that name, World War II spy, Patriot, and the real life inspiration for James Bond, which have been published around the world in multiple languages. His latest book is The Princess Spy, and you can purchase your own copy from the festival's booksellers through the button just below on the screen. Now, over the next hour, I'll be speaking with Larry Loftis, who will later answer questions submitted by tonight's viewers. That's you. To submit a question, just click the Ask a Question button along the bottom of your screen. Just type it in. So, without further ado, please welcome award-winning author Larry Loftis. Welcome, Larry.
Thank you. Thanks, Kris. Thanks for having me.
I am so excited to talk to you about this because I am a true crime and spy thriller person. This is right up my alley. So let's talk about you first. You've got this new book coming out, but let's just talk about you. For many who may love your books but may not know much about you personally, let's start there. You know, you're an accomplished author, but you began your professional career as a lawyer. You've been in the courtroom, you've taught law. So how do you go from legal writing to writing intricate historical stories? What was your path?
It's a painful process, but I got my feet wet when I was in law school because I had heard if you want a good job with a nice big law firm and a cushy paycheck, you need to get on the law review. And it's very hard to get on the law review because only about 10% of the class makes it. And they said, you have to you have to write this. It's about a case. And so I worked around the clock for 3 weeks. The 100 people tried out. They took 12, and I made it into the 12, and they published 4, and I was one of the 4 that they published. So I thought, hey, maybe I can do this writing gig. But I wasn't. I was just a lawyer. I mean, I wanted to graduate, get a good job with a law firm, and so I did. And so I practiced law. But I got the writing bug from the law review, and then so I started. Because they had published, I thought, well, maybe I'll send legal articles to other journals because that gives you prestige if you ever want to teach. It's prestigious for the law career. So I published with the University of Georgia. I published with Suffolk University, National Law Journal, Florida Bar Journal, and all that I was doing while I was working as a lawyer. But it got me, it gave me the writing bug, and the writing bug never went away. I found the practice of law a little boring because, okay, I'm shuffling paper, I'm sending it here and there, I'm doing deals. I was a corporate lawyer. And it's fun for a while, but I have a short attention span. So I'm like, okay, what's next? And this writing I'd been doing all along. So the transition from doing scholarly legal articles to what I'm doing today, it wasn't that hard of a bridge to cross because already writing, I had to learn the craft. I had to learn because I tell people I write nonfiction thrillers. Mm-hmm. It's a combination of 2 things. Not everybody understands that you can do both, but if you have a great story with a great character and you understand how to write thrillers with cliffhangers and pace and so forth, then it can be done. So that's what I wanted to do. So I had to learn the craft of I already had the scholarship, the endnotes and the footnotes and that kind of the bibliography, but I needed to learn the craft of how to write a novel, how to write like a Vince Flynn or Ian Fleming or my favorite author, Ellerson Trevor, to write like that. So you have to study, you have to read their books. So I just read book after book after book, and I'm highlighting every sentence, every other page, reading how to do alliteration and assonance, the meter. Aristotle had talked about the meter in the Poetics, the meter that's like music. Writing is like music. There's a flow, there's a meter, there's a beat. The sound, of course, is obvious, the assonance and consonants when you're writing. And so it all just, took a process. So about 2012, I started writing full time.
You and talking about writing full time, you've published these books, and all of them have these fantastical stories about espionage and secret identities, and they're set in wartime, because they are historical, it's historically accurate. So, why is that so appealing to you? And how did you come about? I would have thought maybe you would be like a John Grisham and write your law stories and in your cases, but this is something that's kind of I want to know the process of how you came to those kind of stories. Is it just what you love to read?
Well, it is, and I already knew because the law would be an easy but look at who's out there. You got John Grisham that's already out there. Dave Baldacci, who's a former lawyer. Steve Barry's a former lawyer. Meltzer's a former lawyer. You know, that's a pretty crowded field. And I was never a litigator, so I never actually entered the courtroom. I was a corporate lawyer doing documents, and so but I had a love for history. I was a political science major in college. So in political science, you're reading books about history, about countries, about the war, about, you know, international relations. So that always intrigued me. And I was just a World War II buff anyway. And those are the kind of the books. And of course, you have the movies. I mean, who hasn't seen Where Eagles Dare and other great World War II movies? Now, the more recent would be Saving Private Ryan, Dunkirk. So I think everybody has a fascination about World War II because it's really the only worldwide event. And so for me, it was just merging scholarship with something that was the natural interest anyway.
Yeah, but not everybody knows about these spies. These are people who are real, but I don't know how to find out about them. So
Right.
how? Yeah, but I'm not asking you to give away your secrets,
No, no, no.
but how do you choose your subjects? I'm sure there are many spies out there that nobody knows about.
Well, and that's what I felt like I was breaking new ground, and I told my agent, I want to do something different. Normally, like you see these books behind me, there's row after row of just World War II books, you know, and basically they're very dry. They're like encyclopedias, and they're history books. They're from start at this point, end at this point. William Shire's famous The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. Great book, but it's just dry. It's just history, history, history. And that's the way all of them are. I mean, I've got memoirs up there of Walter Schellenberg, who was Hitler's spy master, and things like that. So those for hardcore World War II people, that's great. For military people, that's great. But the average person, just it's too boring for them. And I wanted to write something that was historical, seminal research, which I learned in the law review, learned in law school. You want seminal research, that's something that nobody knows about. So it's a contribution. You're making a contribution to scholarship if you reveal things that no one knows, documents, events, etc. And so I wanted to do a scholarly work, but yet have it read like a thriller. And the most common person that people think of is like Ian Fleming, because he's the creator of James Bond. So you don't have Sean Connery if you don't have the books. So all of the Ian Fleming books started first, and then of course they started making the movies. But who didn't grow up with James Bond? I mean, everybody knows about James Bond. We can argue who was the best. I think Sean Connery was, but we can argue about that. But everybody loves James Bond. It's cool. It's exciting. So for me, it was just a natural passion. I love history. I love World War II. I love James Bond. And I just thought, maybe I can merge. Maybe I can merge the scholarship side of me, which is the normal part of me, is the scholarship, law review, legal side, research side, and merge that into the history side, but make it like a James Bond thriller. Make it exciting. Make it fast. Have cliffhangers. The problem is it's nonfiction, so I can't make anything up. I can't do what Vince Flynn does. I can't do what Ian Fleming did. I have to only deal with what actually happened that I can prove happened. But what I get to do is pick where chapters end. So I don't have to tell you what's coming. I can end it and make a cliffhanger without making anything up. And so when you read, Codename Lise, for example, Kirk has said every chapter ends in a cliffhanger. That's by intention, because I want it to read like a thriller novel. I want it to be fast. And so people that read my books generally say they can't tell the difference. They wouldn't know that it wasn't a novel. They wouldn't know that it was not an Ian Fleming novel or a spy novel. And that was my goal all along.
Well, that lends it to what you were saying. It's not dry. It's people are engaged in it. And you mentioned James Bond, and we know that your first book, Into the Lion's Mouth, was about the actual spy who Ian Fleming based that on. But
Right.
your two most recent books, and this just fascinates me because I knew nothing about this, are about female spies. I mean, was that a thing because women were supposed to be meek and not heard, and in the kitchen, that they were used as spies to kind of use their womanly wiles to kind of get into places
Well,
that.
actually, in World War II, women were very frequently used as spies, as couriers, especially in France, especially with the French resistance. Because here's one of the main reasons it happens in France. What the Germans would do when they would take over a country, when they decided, we're kind of losing some of these battles, we might need to replenish the men. Well, they ran out of their own men, and so they figured, well, here's what we'll have to do: we'll get men from other countries. So what they would do is they would go on these things called razzias. And a razzia meant it was a raid. It was a raid to come into a town, to come into a neighborhood, and basically capture all of the men between 18 to 25 and send them off to forced labor. In other words, they would replace the workers, the men workers in Germany, because those workers were turned into German soldiers. So they would capture all the men. So if you were in an occupied country and you were a man, even a male spy, if you're in that age range, and they eventually it's expanded, it goes from 25 then to 30, then to 35, where they were taking all the men. So it was extremely hard for a man and dangerous, because a man would be caught in a razzia. You're at the right age. They don't care who you are. All they want is to capture somebody that they can put in a forced labor, separating widgets, separating ammunition in a factory in Berlin. So, however, they didn't touch the women. So women could go in, and this is what Odette did. So women could go in into France without really, she didn't have to worry about the razzia. Now, if her cover was blown, that would be a different story. If her cover was blown, that she's a spy, that's different. But it was much easier for women. So almost all of the couriers that SOE used were all women. They were all sent into France. Aileen's different because she, like Popov, went into a neutral country. Portugal was neutral where Popov went. Spain was neutral where Aileen went. And Aileen, do you want me to tell you how she was brought into it?
Well, first of all, for people that are watching, if they're not exactly sure, the new book is called The Princess Spy, and it's about this woman, Aileen, and it's Aileen Griffith. It is so fantastical because she was smart, she was beautiful, she was funny, she was charismatic. So was she the perfect person for a spy? I would think maybe like a mousy woman who nobody would notice and would fly under the radar or something.
For certain
Why?
things. And that would be, the mousy person would be great if you were going into France and you basically wanted to blend in.
Right.
That would, but what she was recruited for was something different. She was actually recruited to be a coder, to work in a coding room, which is very important because they have to decode incoming messages coming across the Pyrenees, coming from France, through from the French resistance, basically on German troop movements where Panzer divisions show up, so that we can bomb them. So they would then have to take this information and get it out immediately. This could be 3 o'clock in the morning. She and Robert Dunev, her partner in the coding room, they were on call all night long. So there might be something that comes in at 3 o'clock in the morning. One of them has to cover it. And so they would send it out to the Americans or the British. Basically it would end up with Patton or with Field Marshal Montgomery, and the Americans or the British would pounce on whatever information or deal with it or get somebody out. So this happens every single day. So she's brought in to be that coder, and then they realize after she's there for about a year that she has all these other skills. She was beautiful. She had been a professional model. She was 5'9", beautiful, but she was articulate. She had been trained as a spy, but as an operative, not just as a spy. Like, we're going to teach you, how to code and decode. She was trained to be. Are you ready for this? A killer.
Well, that's what
She,
you and I were talking about earlier. I
yeah,
mean, you said that you've got some papers there too that you said there's like a training set. She could kill people with knives. I mean,
right.
I would have never thought that a 5'9" beautiful woman, we're going to train you to be a killer. So what was so
Well,
special about her?
so they have this place called the Farm. The OSS does. That's our spy agency that's precedes the CIA. So we have the OSS, and the British had about 2 years advance on us. So they've already done this game, and so we asked the British, what do we need to do to train our commandos, to train our spies? So they sent over their top guy, their master. His name's William Fairbairn, very famous, father of modern combat, father of close combat, and the creator of a very famous knife used by special forces around the world called the Fairbairn Sykes fighting knife. He had trained Popov. So we borrowed him. We borrowed this guy Fairbairn to train our people. And it's at a place, it occurs at a place called the Farm. So 100 acres just out of DC. And on the farm, they do everything that commandos would do. They fire every possible handgun that you would find in the World War II battlefield from every country. They fire rifles, they fire machine guns, the German MG-42, they fire the American Tommy gun. She learns, well, here, I'll show you. This is her first week of training at the farm. This is just the first week.
So and if she's learning things like recruiting, ciphering. She's learning field draft. Look, there she's learning how to fight with one of those knives. Oh,
exactly. So one of the and this is just the first week. She has 3 weeks of this. So she's learning how to train, among other things. She becomes a crack shot with all the weapons. And Odette goes through very similar training, and she's a crack shot, which if you've read that book, you see where she used it. But they're trained not just how to use all of the guns, they're trained how to use the Fairbairn Sykes fighting knife from the man who invented it. This is the knife. This is the Fairbairn Sykes fighting knife, 1943 version that Elaine trained with. And it is still used today by special forces around the world because it's the greatest killing knife ever invented. And Elaine was trained to use it in the way that they were taught to take out. In fact, if you watch the famous World War II movie, Where Eagles Dare, Clint Eastwood takes out a German sentry with this very knife in the manner that Fairbairn taught, that Elaine was taught. But she was also how to make a knife out of a newspaper, how to make a dagger out of a newspaper. So she was, in fact, the female version of James Bond. She really was.
Were there more than just her? I mean, was this a normal thing, or was it she was special? They saw something in her that no one else had.
Yes, kind of yes and no. I mean, when she's recruited, she's just recruited like other people, but she's recruited to be a coder, and she goes in the code room, and there's people doing that in Lisbon and people doing that in Zurich and so forth. But when to answer your question, they watch her for about a year. She's got 2 primary supervisors, a guy by the name of James Macmillan and Larry Mellon. Larry Mellon's from the famous Mellon family, and they were her supervisors. And after about a year, they realized she's got talent. You know, this girl's got talent. So they realized we can use her for more than just coding. So they began sending her out. They began turning her loose to become a field agent, which is far more important and actually a little bit dangerous. Now you're interacting with the enemy. And so she goes out sometimes. She goes to parties. She goes to bullfights. She goes to diplomat events. She goes to restaurants that are German-owned restaurants, Edelweiss and Horchers, 2 very famous restaurants that still exist today in Madrid, because we knew that Germans, I mean, the place was owned by Germans and the patrons were Germans, but our people like Aileen needed to go there to see. We wondered about that person. We wondered about Gloria von Furstenberg. Is she a collaborator with the Nazis? Is she, do we need to pay attention to her? So they would go to these places, and she ends up having sub-agents that we pay, that she says, this is dangerous, we need to pay them. So she has her own sub-agents. So these 2 supervisors knew she's got talent more than just sitting in the code room. So then she had really 3 jobs. Her cover was to work as basically a secretary for the American Oil Commission. That's her cover. The oil commission is just, we sold oil to Spain, and we had to tell Spain, look, we have to make sure you don't sell it to Germany. We don't want it to end up on a German submarine in one of your ports. So they had the American Oil Commission there to supervise that, to make sure that didn't happen. So Aileen goes in as a secretary with the American Oil Commission. Well, on the first floor of her building, it was the American Oil Commission. But on the second floor, it was all OSS. All the spies were on the second floor. People like Robert Dunev and Larry Mellon and James Macmillan, all these other spies. So she's going into the building, goes immediately up to the second floor. So the Spanish know her as working for the Oil Commission, but her real job is the OSS. So that's her day job, is coding and decoding. And then at night, she goes out. She goes to these parties. She goes to events on the weekends. She goes to bullfights. She goes to flamenco parties. She's burning the candle at both ends and loving every minute of it.
Well, what did the male spies think of someone like her? Were they
They loved
embracing
her.
of,
They
yeah.
loved her because they could be paired with her. I mean, same with if you read Codename Lise, it's much easier for a couple to slip in anywhere than
Mm-hmm.
for a single person. If you're single, why are you single? Who goes to events alone? Who goes
Mm-hmm.
to a restaurant by themselves? Who goes to a movie by themselves? It's always easier if you're with a couple. So in my prior book, Codename Lise, uh, Peter Chamberlain basically did everything with Odette, and they acted as a couple because no one suspects a couple. So what Aileen would do is she would go out. They actually paired her with another male spy, Edmundo Losao, who is this gregarious Mexican, never met a stranger, life of the party, talk to anybody, dance all night, perfect guy. In fact, his cover was as an agent, as a representative for Disney. The Walt Disney Company. And in fact, the man who negotiated, because they had to have a real contract, he had a real contract with Disney. And the man who negotiated for Disney was none other than Walt's brother, Roy. Roy Disney negotiated Edmundo Lasalle's contract with Disney for that to be his cover. And Disney wanted real work out of him. So you'll see when you read the book, they wanted real work, and he does real work because they wanted to get films into Spain and Portugal. So they pair, and by the way, the OSS reimbursed Disney under the table. No one can see that, but they reimbursed Disney. But they still wanted work out of him. So Aileen would go out with him at night, the Disney representative, and she's the American Oil Commission person. And so they would go out at night to parties. They would go to these restaurants that are just Edelweiss and Horchers and watch and record who's going in, who's going out. So they did a lot as a, what essentially, it looks like a date. It looks like she's
Yeah.
going out with a date. And that was perfectly acceptable. Now she's attractive, so she does garner a lot of attention. There are a lot of suitors. There's a famous bullfighter that falls in love with her, smitten by her. Another OSS colleague, the same thing, falls in love with her. And then, of course, the man that comes in later in the picture, the Count of Romanos, who we can talk about later. But she had no shortage of men to go out with at night, put it that way.
And that helped her be a good spy.
That helped her be a good spy. Yeah.
So how did you find out about Odette and Aileen? How did you find out about them? Because we talked about this a little bit earlier. You don't learn about this in U.S. history. And,
right.
How did you find out about these
Well,
fantastic women?
with Odette, I was doing research on. With Popov, I bought 100 books as part of my research. That's not including all the work at the UK archives and the US that the UK National Archives and the US National Archives. I'm talking about books, and then it expands. But I had a base. And when I did my reading, I looked at other potential spies, other stories, and one that I came across was the greatest spy master ever was this guy named Hugo Bleicher, who was Germany's best Sherlock Holmes, Sam Gerard. If you saw The Fugitive, he was relentless. He did a memoir called Colonel Henry Story, and I bought it for my other research. And he mentioned this Lise woman. I'm like, well, who is Lise? So I started researching Lise. Lise was Odette. That was her code name. And so that led me to Odette Sansom. With Aileen, it was different because she was really under the radar. She was not captured. She was not. They're in a neutral country. But a friend had mentioned me to her and said, I read about something about this woman. I think her name was Aileen Griffith. I'm not sure if it was true, but if it is, there's great stuff in there. So check it out. So that was my job. My job's always, and I hear that all the time. I hear, hey, there's a spy that you need to hear about. There's a spy you could do your next book. I hear that all the time. People email me, and most of the time it's people that I've already checked out, or there's not enough there. They didn't do anything, because to write a thriller, it's not like a normal World War II book. It's not like a normal spy book. To write a thriller, every chapter has to have action and pace and dead bodies and guns and those kind of things. And talk about the needle in the haystack. There are very, very few of those. So it takes me a while to find them. So most of them that people mention, they're dead end. They're dead end streets. But this one was not. So fortunately.
Well, right. And on the ones that are not the dead end streets, do you talk to people that knew them? Do you hunt them down? Is it just you
They're all
find
dead.
out? That's what I was going to
The
say.
people
We're
that knew
talking
them are
World
all
War
dead.
II. Yeah,
Right.
we're
They're all
talking.
dead.
So
Yeah.
how does that happen?
The best place and the primary place is the archives. As a lawyer, I can tell you there are rules of evidence. Like if you want to present something in court and there's maybe potential conflicts, one person says this, one person says that. One of the first classes you take in law school is called evidence. And in evidence, you learn that there's a hierarchy of believability, a hierarchy of credibility. And particularly when there's information that's contrary, you have to go down this list of what's most credible. And one of those is called the business records exception to the hearsay rule, and that means if something is recorded at the time by the people that do that for their job, that's highly credible. If they record it at the time, so you're talking about the person that wrote that memo, the person that was there at the event that's writing the memo. So that's what historians would call primary evidence, primary source. So for me, that's the National Archives, either in the UK or in the US. For Popov, I had to use both. For Aileen, I used the US, and for Odette, I used the UK. But the National Archives is that's where the dead bodies are buried. That's where all the files, all the information is, boxes and boxes and boxes. And if you go through the way people always ask me if I read other books and history books, and I usually just start. If I turn to two things, I turn to the end notes because I want to see what the research looks like, and the end notes for me better look like a law review journal because that's where the real research is. So if anyone wants to see, did he really say that? Did she really say that? Did that really happen? How does Larry know? Well, go to that page and look on the end notes for that page, and you can find the source and you can read for yourself where I found it. Like I'm just looking down at one, and Legion, it was a memo. Legion was Larry Mellon's name, and it says Larry Mellimer, Madrid files listed under Legion. It's located at RG 226, entry 127, NARA. That means it's telling a scholar, if someone wants to check it out, where to go. You can't just go to the archive and say, hey, I'm looking for this letter that I read this guy. You can't do that. I mean, they have thousands of files, thousands and thousands of files, libraries of files. And so I tell them, so just reading from one of these, I'm saying, located in box 1, while his X2 files, X2 was counterintelligence, people that we thought were perhaps Nazi agents. X2 files are in box 24. He also has Paris X2 files located at entry 190B, box 17. All those are for scholars to go find it. If they want to find the actual page where that happened, where that memo is, where that letter is, where that report is, because Aileen she filed 59 reports as a field agent. That's more than any agent in Madrid, and probably more than all of the Madrid agents combined. She was an excellent agent. And so all those, of course, I read all of them. All those reports are there, and you just have to go through all the boxes. But I had to research everybody that was in the Madrid office. I had to pull all their files. So I had to read Robert Dunev's files and Larry Mellon's files and James McMillan's files and her boss's files and the guy that recruited her from the OS, Frank Bryan. I had to get all of his files. He was in Washington. I mean, that's just part of it. It's grunt work. It's mundane work. But every once in a while, you find a nugget. You find a nugget of gold. Eileen's last book mentions a murder that Edmundo LaSalle reports on her buddy, which my editor said, I don't know if we want to put that in. Anyway, so all those things are sort of the dead bodies that I discover going through the catacombs and the archives. I was there. The one in the U.S. is at College Park, Maryland, National Archives 2, and I was there 4 days, open to close, just going through file box after box after box after box.
Well, that was my next question. I mean, you do all this yourself? You don't have.
You have to, because you can't trust someone else. It's your brain. It has to go into your brain because you have to decide what's important, what files, what do you want to get, and doing research in the National Archives is difficult. They have a class. You have to take a class before you can even go in the room. You have to take a class on how to do research there. But even still, half of what I do when I'm in the room is based on my legal training because I know what's believable, what's not, what's admissible in court, what's not, conflicts. And so I have a trained eye to find stuff and to throw out stuff, to know what's gossip, to know what's hearsay, and those kind of things. So it's for me, it's just a perfect storm of finding the person that has my background and training to do something that I think is fun, World War II, spies, James Bond, all that stuff.
Well, now you said it took you 4 days to do that, but you have multiple books. So you get all this together. You have your outline. You know how your story's going to go. And then it takes you a long time to write these books because you've got the facts, but then you've got
Yeah.
to tell the story.
Yeah. Yeah. So the research, normally the Popov book took about a year and a half to 2 years to research because there's so much. He was in two different countries. He was an operator. He operated for the FBI, operated for MI5, MI6, and there was archives in both countries. So that one took about a year and a half. Odette and Aileen both took about a year. It takes about a year just to do the research, and that's because it's one thing to go to when you're in the archives, you're copying. I mean, you're reading, you're glancing stuff, but you have to copy because you don't have time. If you sit there and read the print is this big on a lot of these pages, and one memo could be 36 pages, single spaced, one memo. So I have to photocopy or scan every document and then read it all when I get home. I'm just collecting.
Mhm.
And then so when I get home, I go through it and I collate, and then you have to. I do a calendar, and the calendar's from the beginning of the war, beginning when the person is recruited, until the end of the war when they're out of it. And so I have a calendar. And so I merge the information from the National Archives, the files of what's most believable, with if all of the other books. I mean, the other spy books, people that wrote memoirs, and then the spies memoirs, and the other, like I mentioned on my shelf, is Walter Schellenberg. I've read, of course, his memoir, and he shows up in the story. He shows up in Aileen's story because he's at a bullfight that Aileen's at. And so I know all about him because I've already read his book, and it's great. And there's all cool stuff that he did. So all of that's sort of the other side. So you have the archive side, and then you have the book side, and then the third side is you have the people that are related or were connected to them. Like for Aileen's book, of course she's dead, and most relatives know nothing about what their father or grandfather did because it was all classified, and most spies, like most special operatives, don't like to talk about it, because people were taken out. They saw murders, they saw things that were ugly, and so they don't talk about it. But you want to dig just to see what is available, and so that's part of my job, is to dig. And I found two sons that her partner in the coding room is Robert Dunev. He's dead. His two sons are not dead. His two sons said, "Look, our dad wrote an unpublished memoir. It wasn't to make money with a book. He wrote an unpublished memoir for his family. It's called A Spy Reminisces, just for his family, so that he felt like, before I die, I want my kids to know what I did during the war." He ends up being not only an OSS agent, he becomes a CIA agent. And he said, "I wanted my kids to know." So they sent me this unpublished, private, family-only memoir. It was 100 pages. And in there, which I was glad to see because it confirmed something. There's a line that says, "Which reminds me of the night that I removed the dead body from Aileen's apartment." Bingo. So when I read that, and I told my editor when I was in New York, I said, "Hey, you're not going to believe this, but I met the sons, and the sons gave me their dad's memoir that no one has seen. No one has seen that." But it's about a murder that occurs in the book, and I don't want to give it. I don't
We
give
don't
away a
want to give away
spoiler.
too
But
much.
there's a murder in there, and if you want to find out how I know about this and confirmed it, go to the end notes that I was just talking about and look. It'll be the Spy Reminisces, and I'm thankful to Robert, Michael, and Peter are the two sons who sent me that. They were wonderful.
So tell me if I'm wrong. You have your calendar, you have your research. Do you have the story? And I know it's a nonfiction story, so we know that.
Right.
But do you have the story part of it in your head, and then the facts come in and help you build on that story? I mean, did you
Just the
want to tell
opposite. Just
Aileen's
the
story?
opposite. Other way around. So I do a counter of everything that happened every day, and it's long. I put it on an Excel spreadsheet of everything that happened throughout. And some of them I have to throw out. Some of them I don't have room. I don't have space. It's too much. But that I can weed out later. I start with everything, and it doesn't matter if somebody went to a bullfight and nothing happened. It's in there. So I archive everything that happened from all of the sources, whether it's from Robert Dunev's memoir or Aileen's report from something she filed back in 1944, 1945. And so I put everything on an Excel spreadsheet. And then what this gets to your how do you build the story? I write thrillers, so I look for breaks. Where can I break a chapter? I can't break a chapter on, okay, he went to the store and then called it a day. Sorry, that's boring. You can't
That
end
is
a
not a
chapter like
cliffhanger.
that. So I have to find a place where I can end a chapter. And so when I'm doing this, I want to where there's something's about to break loose. Someone is about to maybe get killed, get shot, get knifed, get whacked. Codename Lise. There's a briefcase that this guy named Marsek is carrying that has Odette's name in it, Peter's name in it, everybody's name in it, and the briefcase is stolen on a train. I ended the chapter there because I want people to go, "Oh, you're kidding!" What? Because they know who got the briefcase.
Yeah.
Well, you'll find out. Keep reading. So that's the goal of the thriller writer is to make people turn pages. You have to
Turn
keep reading.
pages.
And so I don't care if you miss your stop on the subway. I want you keep reading and to read all night. And so that's the goal. And so when I put that together, I decide on where to break the chapters. And then sometimes I have to combine chapters because there's not a good break. But a chapter, one chapter can't be 2 pages and the next 50 pages. They have to be roughly the same length. So I've got to find ways. Sometimes I have to combine chapters or expand them to make the cliffhangers work.
We know these are actual people in your books.
Mm-hmm.
They've all passed away. What happens when you finish the book? Do you miss them? Do you look for the next thing? Do you wish there were more you can find out about them? Is it like, am I asking you to pick your favorite baby, your favorite child?
I love them all. I love all my children. The the I when I finish, I mean, I'm glad. I mean, I've been through like I don't know if you can see these are the drafts.
Oh my
These are
goodness.
these are the paper drafts. I mean, there are drafts that I'll do on the screen on the computer, and these are the paper drafts where you're just going through and you're editing. So by the time I'm done, I'm kind of sick of it. So you're done. But when you do interviews and things, people bring up things and you remember it, and it's cool. I mean, there's cool stuff. I mean, there's so many in all 3 books. There's so many things that happen that are so cool. There are things that I can't put in the book because there's not enough room. I mean, there were things that I wanted to put in for like this one murder that I mentioned that came from Aileen's story, and my editor said, "No, I mean, we're pushing 400 pages. We can't. She wasn't involved in that murder." And I'm like, "No, but it's a great. There's a murder there." And I bought a book specifically about the guy that was murdered, and it's a fascinating story. And he's like, "It's too much. We can't. So we have to cut it just to keep the book the right size." So that's a little painful for me. But to answer your question, what always happens is when I go to events, people want to talk about it, and that excites me because I know things that I can tell them that are beyond what's in the book. And then there's always information that comes out afterwards because family members surface, people surface. I met 2 of Aileen's grandchildren, and I'm not sure 2 of the granddaughters. I'm going to be on the Today Show on Friday, and I'm not sure. We were trying to get 2 of the granddaughters on the show with us. Kerry Sanders from NBC's already interviewed me, and I know he's trying to interview them either maybe tomorrow. But Christina, who will become the next Countess of Romanones, and Carla are 2 of the granddaughters, Aileen's granddaughters. And so you always meet, oftentimes you meet family members after. With the Dunev brothers, I met them before. But with Popov, I met one of his sons right away. And so that's always fun. And you become friends with them. For codename Lise, Odette's granddaughter, Nicole, came to New York to be on the Today Show with me, as well as with her 2 daughters, which were Odette Sampson's great granddaughters. So you build relationships, you build friendships with the family, which is all kind of cool because they're happy. They know nothing about what you're telling them about what their father, their grandmother did, which they're thankful to hear because they didn't know. I mean, they're not going to the archives. I mean, they're not doing the hard work that I'm doing because who does that? It's in a different country. And it's just thousands of pages that you have to pour through boxes and boxes. And you have to know where to look and all that stuff. So anyway, and it takes a year just to do the research. I mean, they have their own lives. They're not going to do that. So they're happy. And usually we'll get foreign translations, and I'll get, like I saw Popov's son not too long ago, and I said, okay, here's your copy from Holland for the Dutch, the Dutch copy, and here's your copy, the Serbian copy, and so I'm giving Taiwan, I'm giving the Chinese version, and these are for your, about your dad in all these different languages. So that's kind of fun stuff that happens after you're done.
Well, you mentioned like when you go to events like book festivals and things, and unfortunately with the pandemic, we're not able to do that this year. So what has it been like doing virtual, like with you and I tonight? Is it just as cool, or do you really
Well,
miss and hope we get back?
there's advantages and disadvantages. On the one, you don't have to catch a plane, which is great. You don't have to do all that, the travel part of it, which is a pain. But what I really do miss, and I miss terribly, is the Savannah Book Festival is unbelievable. I mean, it is the greatest festival, and everything from top to bottom is first class. I mean, everything from the places, the venues where you do events, the people, the author reception at the beginning, the food courts. I mean, everything about it is first class. So that when I was there 2 years ago, they had me in this fabulous, I don't know, 200-year-old church, 300-year-old church that seated 500 people, and C-SPAN was there to record it, so C-SPAN recorded it. The people are incredibly friendly. Everybody, I mean, the people that are working the event as well as just the patrons that are coming to enjoy it. Everybody's friendly. Maybe it's a Savannah thing, but everybody's friendly, and I absolutely loved it. And the hotel that I stayed in was absolutely fabulous downtown. Everything was first class. I absolutely loved it. So I
I
missed
love
that part.
that.
I missed
Okay.
that part. Penny Lane, is that the name of the hotel?
Yeah.
Um, it
Yeah.
was unbelievable. Unbelievable. Love that place. Anyway, so
I'm sure they're going to be happy to hear that.
I wanted to come back. He said, "Well, it's going to be virtual." Oh, okay. I'll sit in but I don't have to catch a plane, so that's not too bad.
When you were here, and I've never been to other, I've lived here for 20 years, so I haven't been to other book festivals. Do you have a lot of chance to interact with other authors that you admire at book festivals, or is it just like Savannah?
Sometimes it's and in fact, I'll be doing the Palm Beach Book Festival here in a couple of weeks, and that's great. And it's going to be virtual again. But when you do it, and I did that one about 2 years ago as well. They actually have a night that's just for the authors, a very small setting, very intimate dinner for the authors, and you get to meet all of them and talk to them, which is great. So generally, you do, but everybody's, unless there's a designated dinner, everybody's doing their own thing. I mean, authors are on at different times. One guy might be at 9 o'clock in the morning, and you're the woman that wrote the book that you want to talk to. She's not on till 4. So that's just the life of doing a festival. I mean, that just goes with the territory. But you generally, over time, you tend to meet people and get a chance to talk to them.
Well, when you
So
have a new book like The Princess Spy, you were here for Codename Lise. I knew I was going to call her
right.
Elise. Elise. The thing about the Savannah Book Festival is where they have the tents where people come and buy the books. What do you like about interacting with people who have read your books and talk to you about that, and people that are excited to read your new book? What is that like when you see them show up?
Well, it's great because you get to, when you're writing the book, and I'm going through these drafts,
Yes.
and I'm thinking, will people want to hear about that? And so I have to put myself in their shoes. Will people want to hear about that? And so I'm working through the research, and I'm poring over these endless endnotes, and I'm at a point like, okay, this is a little bit off the tangent. This is a little bit off the tangent. Do people want to hear about that? It's not exactly like what someone else did, what another agent did, the background on Edmundo LaSalle, how he came from Mexico to end up being Aileen's partner. I mean, all those things, I have to make a judgment call. So when I meet people, if they've already read the book, some have already, or they read a prior book, they'll say, "Oh, I love that part about," and they'll mention some of the things where I was thinking, should I put that in or not? Should I put that in or not?
Validation.
Yeah, and so you're like, okay, good. I mean, I put it in for you. I put this in because I knew I'm thinking if it interests me, it'll interest other people. Not everybody. Everybody has a different thing that they're interested in. But if you're writing a whole book, you cover a lot of bases. And so eventually you're going to find something that they're really thrilled about. I mean, in Codename Lise, there's a torture scene. a lot of people are really queasy about the torture scenes, and I had to make a judgment call. I had to say, her toenails were torn out, and I had to make a judgment call.
Oh,
Do I put it in, and how much do I describe it? And there's a fine line there. How much do I don't want people to throw up after they read it, but I want them. And in fact, I talked to when we were on the Today Show. We were off the air, and the host asked the granddaughter about it. Look, Larry writes about this torture scene. What do you think about that? And the granddaughter, I think I said Aileen, Odette's granddaughter said, yes, absolutely. We wanted that in. We want that in. We want people to know what happened to our grandmother. We don't want it sugar-coated. We don't want to just blow over it. Oh, and by the way, yeah, they torture. Okay. And then they wanted people to know what really happened. So I have to, my feeling was, and I didn't ask them. I mean, I have to do what's in my heart, what I believe is best. The editor, in fact, sometimes the editors say, I don't know if you want to put that in. And there was no pushback on that. But that's my judgment call. And I just felt like I need to put to enough to show what really happened. There's a goal for every novelist and for every good nonfiction writer, and that's verisimilitude. I want to make the reader feel like they are there. They are in the scene. They are sitting next to Aileen, or sitting when she's in the coding room, or when she's in her apartment and someone's breaking into it at night because she hears the shutters creak and she's reaching for a gun. I want them to feel like they are there when Odette's about to be tortured. I want them sweating. I want the reader sweating just like she was. And so that's the goal, verisimilitude. And the only way that you can build that is to hit emotions, to hit the senses, to give people what the sounds were, what the feeling was, what the temperature was. I mean, anything. I mean, all the little things, all of our senses: sight, sound, touch, feel, taste. I want to hit as many of those as I can so that I can make the reader feel like they're there. And I want them, if it's a torture scene, I want them sweating. And if it's a cliffhanger, I want them. I'm talking about the train rocking and Marcette falls asleep. I want them there. And so that's the goal. So I have to be descriptive about it, as a novelist would.
Well, when you're talking about things that actually happened too, these are people that gave up part of their lives to serve their country in a way that nobody else has. I mean, you can't sugarcoat it. They
Right.
did that, so
Right.
that's pretty cool. So
Right.
I could talk about this forever. Oh, but I'm wondering if we have any questions. This is exciting because I don't know what the questions are going to be. Yeah. Okay. So our first question says, Larry, thanks for being part of the Savannah Book Festival virtual presentations this year. I believe I saw your presentation at the festival a year or two ago, and it was very entertaining. Perhaps you could shed light on what your usual work routine is, which allows you to write these excellent books. And it says, oh yeah, I know you're a Gator, so go Dogs.
Oh, that hurts. Okay. And so the next question is?
We talk about your process and your research, but like, do you set up 2 hours every day in the morning to type? And
everybody has their own formula, and I'm going to tell you what mine is, but you've got to do what works for you, because John Grisham gets up and writes at 7:00 in the morning. Steve Barrett gets up and writes at 7:00 in the morning. That's not me. I'm not a morning person. I'm a night person. At 7:00 in the morning, I don't want anything other than a protein bar and a Monster drink. That's all. I'm not right, because I'm groggy. I mean, I'm groggy in the morning, and I found that true in law, in both undergrad and law school. I had an 8:00 class every morning, and regardless of how much sleep I had, I was still groggy for the 8:00 class. It didn't matter if I had 8 or not; I was still groggy. So for me, and there are other people, like, I don't know if you're familiar with Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill was a night owl, and he would work and he would write until often 2:00 in the morning, because that was his best time. And so for me, I had to figure out, and this took years, because when you're a lawyer, you're on a schedule. Everybody shows up at 9:00 and leaves at 6. That's the schedule. So I had to figure out what works for me, where my best time is. So for me, I use the mornings to, in fact, I'm thinking of Stephen King, because Stephen King says, I write in the morning, the afternoons are for naps and Red Sox games, and then I read at night. Everybody has their formula. So mine is, in the morning, I get my Monster, I get my protein bar, and I do the work which requires the least amount of on-the-ball effort, focus, which is emails, admin, all that stuff. I can do the emails, and I'm not worried about that. I don't have to be like right on edge. And then so in the afternoons, that's where I'm ready to go. In the afternoons, by the time I've gone through the mundane emails and stuff, and I'm fired up, and I've had my Monster. Now the workout's at night, but I've had my Monster. I start digging in the afternoons, and my best writing time is anywhere from 11 to probably 4. And then you start to get a little tired, because you've been working all day, and then you need a break. So around 4:00, 5:00, then it's time to get something to eat, to go work out or whatever. And then at night I'll read too. I'll read at night because you can get a the rise and fall of the Third Reich and curl up in a chair with with a cup of hot chocolate. So I'll read oftentimes at night or review drafts and stuff. But my best creative time when I need to be Johnny on the spot, get it right, get the prose right, have it perfect. That time for me is in the afternoons.
Well, you mentioned reading too, and that leads right into our second question. Someone says you mentioned reading 100 books about Popov. What did you feel was missing from his story that led you to write about him?
Well, let me correct the question because I didn't say that I read 100 books. I purchased. I read far more because there are. This is true for all research. Some books are reference books. Like behind me, I've got the Oxford Dictionary or the Oxford Encyclopedia of World War II. That's a reference book. If you want to find out what happened at the Battle of Midway, there's a little section on the Battle of Midway. So that's a reference book. You read the portions you're looking for. Other books you read cover to cover. I mean, like a memoir from Schellenberg, you read that cover to cover. But I purchased 100, but I reviewed another 300 on top of that. So 400 books that I consulted, and then about 10,000 pages of archives. So now back to the. So what was the second part of the question about?
The person was saying, what did you feel was in all that material? Right. What was missing from a story that you put into yours that made you want to tell it?
Well, there's not necessarily anything that's missing. It's that the complete story's never been told. For example, like with Odette's, there was in 1949, there had been a biography, an author's biography of Odette in 1949. And there was all kinds of stuff missing. Peter Churchill had written 3 memoirs in the 40s and 50s, 3, and not one was referenced in there because they're written before he wrote them. So there's always information, and most of the time, in fact, almost all the time, what's missing? Everything that's in the National Archives, everything, because it was all classified. Everything was classified when these books were coming out, and so they don't have access when Elaine is out, and when Odette's out, and when Popov's out. All that information is classified. So they're relying, and by the way, they signed non-disclosure agreements, so they can't say anything. In fact, that's why people don't know who Fleming based James Bond on, because it was classified. Fleming had signed an oath of secrecy, and if he said, I based it on this guy in an Astoral because I watched him in Casino Astoral on August 1, 1941, he would be thrown in jail for violating the document that he signed. I mean, agents today do that. CIA agents. The CIA will not give anybody a CIA file on any agent ever, because they feel that secrecy is very important, especially for spies, even after they leave. So all of the classified stuff is never in there. So even a guy like Popov, he's trying to, or Eileen, they're remembering something that happened 30, 35, 40 years ago that they're doing completely by memory. Well, I can't remember where I put my keys 2 hours ago. And so how are they going to remember every single detail of everything that they did? And by the way, they don't even know what the people around them did, because that's all classified too. So I basically collect everything that everybody did and put it in one. So it's not like people left things out. It's they had no access to it. They don't even know. They don't even know what happened. I mean, Aileen doesn't even know what happened around her back. Things that are happening behind her that she can't see, like memos about her coming from Washington. She never saw those. Memos about her from her supervisor. She never saw those. The same is true with all of them. They only see a very small of what they are doing at the time. And spies are not allowed to keep diaries. They can't keep it's against they're not allowed. So they have no record of what they did. Everything's by memory. So
it's against the spy code.
It's against the spy code. It's absolutely against the spy code. And it's a frustration for me, because even for Eileen, I'm confident, worked for the CIA doing odd jobs after she left, which is what Robert Dunev did as well. He put that in his spy reminiscences. And so I asked the CIA under the Freedom of Information Act for all their files, all of these people that were in the Madrid office. I've got all the OSS files because I got them at the National Archives, all that's been declassified. I wanted the CIA files after they left, who worked for the CIA. And I get this thing back from the CIA that says, yeah, we released all the OSS documents to the National Archives. Well, that wasn't my question. I didn't ask for the OSS files. I have the OSS files. I want the CIA files. They don't give those. I was talking to a president of Association of former intelligence officers 2 days ago. He said he was a career CIA guy. He said, Larry, the CIA will never, ever release any personnel file on any former agent, ever. So there you
So if
go.
you want to know the most rounded story, well, you need to read your books because you have kind of
right.
All right. This question, I like this question because this person was really listening. It's a long one. So it says, as part of your writing process, you mentioned outlining all of the scanned documents from the National Archives onto a calendar to slowly piece together the timeline, the story, and maybe it's the subject matter, but it makes this person wonder, is your first floor cover that you're an author? And if so, what does your secret second floor research war room look like? They're talking about how you said second floor, first floor.
Yes,
I like that.
Yes, very good. They are paying attention. You get an A for that, whoever put that in. No, this is the war room. This is I want, when I was a lawyer at the first firm I worked for, a big Atlanta firm out of law school, and all the litigators, they had a room that they actually called the war room. Because that's where, if you have a case, and same true with a corporate lawyer, if you have a big deal the next day that's closing the next day, you need to be there all night. I mean, so the litigators, sometimes they are there all night together, crunching the files, crunching the paper, the documents. And I remember being in a corporate conference room at 2 o'clock in the morning because we had a big merger that was going on, and I was the guy that had to go through all the minute books for all the companies. And I'm there at 2:30 in the morning after having worked a full day. So lawyers occasionally have these things called war rooms. So I just figured, I'm writing about war, so I need to have, so this is my war room since I'm writing about war.
I see.
But my code name, which people have asked, I threw it out to my Facebook followers, people who follow me on Facebook or my page, and everyone agreed that my code name needed to be Barrister, which is the British version of a lawyer. So Barrister it is.
Okay, well, Barrister, are you working on any future books? And if so, would you be willing to share anything about the subject?
Well, I could share and tell you about it, but then, I'd have to kill you.
Oh
I'd have to kill you
please be careful with that thing.
I am. I mean, there's a pipeline, because from the moment you turn in the manuscript for a book, it takes a publisher a year to get it out. A year from when you turn it in. So there's always you've got a delay there. So I've done almost all of the research for the next book, and very close to the end. I'm already outlining. I've got the whole spreadsheet on the Excel spreadsheet of what happened on every day. Read all the books. I've read all the stuff in the archives. So I'm very close, and I obviously can't tell you the title or anything, but I will tell you this. I was telling Kris before we were live that I'm running out of countries. I mean, I do stories about spies in different places doing different cool things. So Popov was a British double agent who was MI6. Odette was SOE, Special Operations Executive, operating for the British, operating in France. Aileen is OSS, an American spy agency operating in Spain. So I need another country. So I found this person, and I'll just say this person, who was in the Netherlands. And the Netherlands was right in the thick of it because they were one of the first countries invaded in 1940, and there was thousands of people were executed there, thousands, and they were involved with the resistance. And they were it's another woman, and she was arrested. And I'll probably stop there.
I know, because somebody's going to go find something out. But yeah. I love that you're so excited about it. Okay, last question. Okay, first of all, this person says thank you for participating in the Savannah Book Festival events. It's been a genuine pleasure to listen to you. And I can't imagine what else you can come up with of anything that you've told us already. But in your research for The Princess Spy, did you find anything particularly shocking or surprising?
I did. The two shot. I mean, the murder that I talked about, that's an Alfred Hitchcock murder, without question. So that one, but I already kind of knew about it, so I don't know that that's shocking. But there was one that was an aha moment, that was a shocking fall out of your chair, and that was Aileen's last memo that I mentioned. Her very last memo was filed on a Friday, and it just so happens it was July 15, which was a Friday the 13th. So she files her last memo on Friday the 13th, and this is the one that she mentions about this killing that had happened. And the memo says, and it's all, I mean, this is in, this is codename Butch writing to Legion, her one of her supervisors, and she says, Pallotta, he was the code name for Edmundo. Pallotta informed me yesterday that so and so was murdered, blah blah blah, and that there will be that so and so and so and so were involved, and there are going to be more murders to come. I mean, this is it. This is the last memo
Dun,
she
dun,
filed.
dun.
Right, dun dun dun, and there are more murders to come. So I have to track that down. I have to trace that. I have to find the guy that was murdered. And there's a book on my shelf behind me. I have to find out everything. And it's worthy of another book. I may have to tell my publisher it's worthy of another book because it's unbelievable what this guy did that was murdered, and he was murdered in a very grisly. I won't tell you how, but it's a very grisly murder. They tried to burn him to cover up the evidence, but they couldn't quite hide him after they burned him and all this stuff. And it really happened. It's in Aileen's, not the details of what they did to him, but that he was murdered. It's in it's the very last memo she files. And so, I hate it when people say, "Oh, she's in Madrid. Nothing happened in Spain because it's a neutral country." Really? Well, let me tell you about the people who were murdered there.
I love your enthusiasm, and I can literally just picture you going through your research and almost being like, oh my gosh, and does anybody else know about this? Has anybody else looked at this in the last 60 years kind of thing?
Right, right. I'm like, no one has. I mean, no one has. I didn't heard about this guy or this murderer, and it's buried in a file. It's buried, and the OSS is closed 1 month after she files the memo, so she and Edmundo can't even trace it. I mean, their job is to trace that stuff, find out who's involved, French resistance, why there was a murder, blah blah. That's their job. So they can't even do it because the SS is being shut down. So maybe I'll do that as my book after the next one.
There you go. Any more questions? Do we have any more questions? Oh, we are almost out of time. Well, first of all, what did we learn tonight? Women rule. That's awesome.
There you go. Trained to kill.
Yeah,
They're trained killers. Trained with even knives and guns and all that good
or
stuff.
Or a high heel.
Or high heel. Yeah.
Author Larry Loftis, on behalf of the Savannah Book Festival, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule and your work. And we look forward to a time when we can all be together again. Isn't that right?
You, Kris. I would love it. Look forward to returning.
Thanks for having me. Great. Have a great night.
Thank you,
everybody. I just want to say thank you to the festival folks for letting me have the honor of being your moderator tonight. Savannah Book Festival is offering free access to some of our earlier virtual sessions, event recordings, as well as earlier festivals for a limited time beginning this weekend. Be sure to check the event page on savannahbookfestival.com and keep checking often to see future author events, although they're going to have to really work hard to be as cool as Larry. So the festival is a nonprofit, so please give generously so we can ensure it can go on for years and years. You can make donations on the book site. Thanks, everybody, and have a great night. Bye, Larry.
Bye-bye. Thank you.